Okay. So welcome everybody to session. I am very excited to let you all know that we have very special guest speakers for this session. I'm very pleased to introduce you to Dr. Christina Li, the Assistant Professor of Inorganic Chemistry, and Katie Sherman, an Assistant Pretreatment Coordinator. How are you, Katie and Dr. Li?
Very good. Thank you for inviting me.
So to begin, Dr. Li and Katie, would each of you mind sharing what you both do for work and your research?
Go ahead first.
Christina, are you there? Dr. Li? My apologies.
Should I answer them?
Yes, please.
All right. So at my job, I started out working in the lab. So we are a wastewater treatment plant. So if everyone knows that the water department makes the water come out of your faucet, but we deal with the water that's been used. So all the water that goes down the drain, that's what we handle at my work. And I used to work at the lab, and we do tests on the water, make sure it's safe to go back into the environment, and we test different stages within the treatment process. And now I work in pre-treatment, and I kind of do more office work, and we kind of make sure that no harmful chemicals get into the water in the first place.
And you want your little chairs.
Awesome.
Maybe skip those.
Dr. Li, are you there?
It's a fun job.
Would you like to share what you do for work and your research?
No, you've done there.
Everyone mute.
Everyone mute.
Katie, would you be willing to share what your favorite part is about your job?
Yeah, my favorite part is getting to do special projects. Like a lot of times now, I do office work or I'm in a lab most of the day. But every once in a while, I need to be called out into the field, and I have to do stuff from.
You want to go sit inside until
I have to go get samples from somewhere. We're right by Lake Michigan here in Indiana. So a lot of times I gotta go there and suit up, go get samples out of what is the field. It could be anywhere in like our jurisdiction of sampling. And that's the most fun part, is getting out and going to do something that I don't get to do every day.
That's really fantastic. What do you personally love about STEM, and how did you know that you wanted to pursue it?
So I have just always been interested in science. Like even in high school, all my favorite classes were science. You do in high school, you do chemistry, biology, physics. I took anatomy, and I just always knew that I wanted to study science in college. It just has always fascinated me, and so choosing a biology major and a chemistry minor at Ball State University was an easy decision.
What was your personal experience pursuing STEM and biology?
It was largely, usually positive. My family and stuff was always supportive. They encouraged me to do sciences. A lot of times, girls aren't always encouraged to do science because, more interested in other things. But, I had always had Legos, and my mom would always have us very involved with school science stuff. And then it's people always think about it. It's a really science lets you be creative. You know, you need a creative thinker sometimes for problem solving, and it's very useful in science. And I've, my grandpa was a chemist, so that helped. So let me think what else. And then at school, Ball State University, where I went, there's literally like a 2-to-1 female to male ratio at that school. So there was always, always other women. I was never like the only girl in my science class or anything like that. I had so many brilliant female professors. And then even now at work, my supervisors are amazing, and I feel like, we all have opportunities to, move up and stuff. Like I said, I worked in the lab, and now I work in the pre-treatment area. It was, a step up. So hopefully one day I even could be in charge of the lab. That is my goal.
That's great. What personally inspired you to pursue biology and chemistry?
Ooh.
So it does concern me, and it doesn't exactly reflect well on your ability to commit or to provide a stable home for one.
Oh, okay. It should be good.
I think that I have just
They're going in each other's
curious. So the fact that you can use science to learn about just about around us.
I mean, you'd be great.
Like almost everything we have has an explanation,
In the month
science related. And then, I like living things. I like animals. That's why I pursued biology. In the past, I wanted to do forensic science. Like, you ever watch Law and Order, those kind of forensic science shows. That's what I originally wanted to do. So that's why I majored in biology. But I got this awesome internship opportunity here where I live, and I ended up really liking it. So that's why I'm working here. And something else that inspires me is I love when biology and art come together. Like, I love artists that kind of have a scientific meaning or way about it. I wish I had a picture, but I've seen like a petri dish, of bacteria that was someone had painted in different colored bacteria to look like Starry Night. Like, that's amazing. Someone was so creative to come with that. That is so cool. That's one of the things that I just love about biology.
That's really awesome.
And yeah, that's basically so much. Yep.
So Katie, do you have any advice for students interested in pursuing STEM?
Yeah, I mean, when I was pursuing STEM, I knew it was going to be a lot of hard work. And it's a lot of hard work. Like, you got to study. I had friends with non-science majors, and they seemed like they could goof off a little bit more. But you really have to study in the sciences. Because, I had a tough time. I'm not even going to lie. It wasn't easy peasy smooth sailing. It was, I used to stay up all night studying. You live at the library. It's very hard. Something I wish someone would have told me when I was going to high school is pay more attention, take notes now, because now is when it's easy. It gets harder in college. And then once you're in college, you have a lot less time with the teacher. It's a lot more working on your own. So you should try to get good study habits as soon as you can, learn how to learn on your own, because that's what it's going to be like later. And then if you think the basics are hard now, get a good foundation, because, everything just builds. Try super hard in math. I was not the best at math. I made it, but math was a struggle for me. That's why I only minored in chemistry. There's a lot of math in there. So yeah, it's basically, you know, get a good foundation, and then because you can just build, and it's easier if you get a good solid start.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I really appreciate you being here and helping inspire all of these participants to hopefully pursue STEM in their future.
You're welcome. I have a couple of things to say, if that's okay.
Of course.
All right. So I have a couple of science jokes for you. So first thing, what do you call an acid with an attitude? Amino acid. And I got another one. All right. So what kind of pictures do biologists take? Selfies. See, it's the kind of, yep, that's the funny stuff that I like. So, all right. That's my 2 jokes.
Thank you for sharing.
You're welcome.
Christina Li, are you here now? Okay. Thank you for sharing, Katie. I hope that you have a wonderful day, and I really appreciate you coming out here to talk to all of us.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me. I really think this is an awesome program and a great idea for your Gold Award. So thank you for having me.
Of course.
All right. So should I sign off and you're gonna talk about your experiment for the day?
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Bye. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for letting me have you.
Bye.
Bye. Dr. Li, we can't hear you. Okay, so Dr. Li is gonna try reconnecting, and then we'll see if we can hear about her experience pursuing STEM.
Hello.
Hi.
Hey, sorry. I think my my webcam and my headphones were not working together, but
No worries.
so, unfortunately I have no camera now, but I think my microphone should be working.
That's okay. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, so I actually had a couple of slides that sort of address all of these questions that you posed, and I thought maybe that would be the most efficient way to talk a little bit about what a chemistry professor does. Does that sound good?
Yeah, that'd be fantastic. Do you want me to stop sharing so that you can?
Yeah,
Okay.
that would be great.
Let me know if you're able to. I'm not sure if it's disabled for participants.
It looks like it is disabled.
Okay.
So while we're waiting, I actually am very curious for all of you that are on the call, what your favorite topic in science is. So if you could put that into the chat while we're waiting for this screen sharing to come up, I would love to know. And it could be anything. It doesn't have to be like chemistry, biology, physics. It could be rainforests or fossils or whatever you think is really awesome and exciting in science.
Okay, it looks like I have made it so that you can share your screen.
Okay, perfect. All right. So what I wanted to talk a little bit about today was just to let you know sort of what it is, what the job is to be a chemistry professor. So I'm an assistant professor at Purdue, which is located in West Lafayette, Indiana, which is probably not so far from where you guys are. Where are you guys located? Hannah, where are you located?
I'm from Michigan. I know that a lot of our participants are located across the country. So I think we have some in California, Washington, a few in Michigan, Virginia, all over the place.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, so Purdue is actually primarily a STEM university. So in many years from now, when you guys are thinking about where you'd like to go to college, if you think STEM is what you want to do, any form of science or engineering, Purdue is a really awesome place to do that. But what I wanted to talk about today was actually just to give you an idea of sort of all of the different things that we do as chemistry professors. So actually, maybe you guys can take 30 seconds or so and think about what you think I do as my job. And I'm actually going to give you sort of the most obvious one, because I think this is the first one that you guys will come up with, is that a chemistry professor is a teacher, right? It's probably not so different from your middle school teachers, your elementary school teachers, right? I get up in front of a whiteboard or a blackboard and I, write some chemical equations. I talk about chemistry. But in reality, a chemistry professor actually does a lot of other stuff too. And so what I'd like you guys to do is take approximately 30 seconds and try to come up with 3 more things that you think a chemistry professor does besides teaching. And you can add those into the chat as well. So quick brainstorm. What else do you think a chemistry professor does? Let's see, I see someone said experiments. What else? Learns, writes papers, research. Nice. That's I think some professors probably do that. I am not the type of professor that cuts up brains. Your mom does. That's pretty cool. Hypothesis. Wow, you guys are like really on top of it. Okay, that's awesome. So yeah, so I think, all of you guys identify sort of the next most important thing I would say a chemistry professor does, which is research. And I think as a chemist, the research that we do is sort of similar to, I think, what you kind of imagine. We've got like flasks full of colorful liquids and we're pouring them from one thing to another and we're boiling them and there's like crazy things bubbling. But what we're really interested in research is just thinking about sort of on a really basic level, on a molecular level, how does one thing change into another thing? And that's actually sort of, it sounds like a really simple question, but it's actually really complicated to try to understand something at a single molecule or at a single atom level. And that's really what a chemist is interested in. Yeah, and so a lot of these other suggestions that you guys have come up with, things like writing papers, doing experiments, it's all sort of part of this researcher kind of role. But it turns out actually a chemistry professor or a professor in general does all kinds of other things that are beyond teaching and science. So just to give you kind of an idea, another thing we spend a lot of time doing is mentoring. So as a professor, we work with a large number of undergraduate and graduate students. And you can think of a mentor as someone like maybe your school counselor or one of your teachers that helps to give you advice about what you want to do in the future, right? So it's like if you're thinking about, oh, I really love science and I think I want a career in science or I want to go study science as a college student, you might go talk to your school counselor, something like that. So that's also a role that I serve for my students. And then another thing that I think maybe you guys really haven't thought much about actually is that a professor is also a manager. So you guys probably, your parents probably have managers in their jobs at companies, right? And what a manager does really is sort of help to coordinate the efforts of a big team of people. So chemistry is very much like a team effort, right? So a lot of people are working together to try to solve these important problems. But you need someone who's sort of like at the head and kind of putting them all and forcing them all to go in the right direction so that not everybody's just sort of off doing their own thing, but everybody's kind of trying to get focused and really push towards solving a particular problem. And then a couple of the other things that we do, one is you can think of us as publicists as well, right? I'm here telling you about what it's like to be a chemistry professor. I actually do quite a bit of traveling and talking to tell people about what we do as scientists. And we have to publicize our science in order to get the word out.
I'm sorry, we had some technical difficulties. If you'd be willing to share your screen again.
Yeah, let me do that.
Sorry about that.
No worries. And then sort of the last thing that we might have to do, sort of in addition to publicizing our work, actually is also serving as a fundraiser for our work. And so you can imagine, you know, you guys maybe have done fundraisers before, maybe selling cookies or magazines or something like that. I guess Girl Scouts obviously sell cookies. That's a form of fundraising. So that's also a thing that we need to do, is we need to raise money to do the science that we do. We're not necessarily given funding, you know, to do all of the really interesting and really difficult things that we're doing in the lab. And we have to go find people who are really excited about science to help fund what we do. And so you can think about being a professor really as being like an amalgamation of all of these different roles. And I think, you know, obviously a long time away for you guys, but if this is something you think you might like, you know, really having a really diverse career where you get to do lots and lots of different things, being a professor is a really awesome career pathway, because you get to think about all kinds of different problems. You get to think about the really fundamental science, but you also get to go out and tell people about that science and travel and fundraise and publicize what you do. So I'm going to spend a little bit more time talking, I think, more specifically about the researcher aspect of being a professor. And I think that's something sort of you guys are probably interested in, because this is obviously a STEM workshop. So what do you guys think a researcher does? What's sort of your impression of what a researcher does? Let me find my chat window again. They research things. That's not terribly specific. Well, I would say that the first thing to do when you're thinking about what a researcher does is really just to be curious and to ask questions. So think about, for yourself, you know, what is a scientific question that you personally are curious about, right? What would you like to learn about? What is going on with the screen? And then once you have a scientific question that you're really interested in, is you want to know whether that question has already been answered. Yeah, so there are some really cool ideas that are coming up in the chat. For example, how many galaxies are there besides ours? And so if that's the question you want to ask, the next thing you want to do is go find out, does somebody already know the answer to that question, right? Has somebody already done the research to figure out the answer to that question? Yeah. And I say we, but I mean sort of the world at large. So do we as the scientific community, do we as humanity already know the answer to that question? And then once you've figured that out, you say, okay, nobody knows the answer, right? This is just a totally unknown thing. So that means it's a good topic for research, right? Obviously, you don't want to do research on something that's already known, because you could just look that up on the internet or look it up in a textbook, and there's no reason to spend time on it as a researcher. But if you've come up with a really great question, now you need to come up with the experiments and the hypotheses to help you answer this question. And this is actually sort of the bread and butter of doing research, is coming up with the experiments, coming up with the hypotheses, and then going into the lab and actually testing those hypotheses. So once you've actually gone out to do the experiments, now you need to evaluate your experimental results and then think about whether those results support or disprove your original hypothesis. And I think one of the really important things about being a scientist is being really skeptical sort of your own conclusions and of your own hypotheses, right? And to say, like, I could always be wrong, right? There's no reason to think think necessarily that my hypothesis was correct. And so really being willing to say like, okay, I'm going to disprove my own hypothesis because the science is not pushing me in that direction. And I think that's sort of an important factor about being a scientist, is sort of being really self-skeptical and really always questioning the results that you see. And then based on step 4, you go back and repeat and continue the process until you've reached a point where you can say, yes, I have a hypothesis that's really well supported by my data, and that I can really say now is sort of a good answer, or at least a good preliminary answer to the question that I asked. And then actually the last part, which is still very important, is to actually write your scientific found in the laboratory with the world, right? So everybody now knows what you've accomplished and what scientific question you've answered. So I'll share a little bit of what I do. So I would say that the question that I was really interested throughout my scientific training and also now as a professor is this question of how we convert renewable fuels to generate energy. So my research personally here is thinking about, developing better ways to convert fuels, convert forms of fuel that don't generate CO2 in order to drive all the things we need, in our world, to power our cars, to power electricity. How can we do that without creating more CO2 in the atmosphere? And so sort of if we follow our guideline that I showed you, the first thing we needed to know was figure out what was already known about this question. So we go into the literature, we go into the textbooks, and we ask the question, okay, so what are our options? What types of renewable fuels exist? What types of non-renewable fuels exist? And so just to give you a little bit of a chemistry lesson, I promise this isn't going to take too long. And I think also for those of you that haven't taken chemistry before, some of this might look a little bit foreign. But the molecules that I have drawn up on the right hand there, right? So all of those things with CH3s, are what we call fossil fuels, carbon-based fuels. So these are all the things that typically go into our cars and power plants, right? So gasoline is made up of molecules that look like this. Coal is made up of molecules that look like this. Natural gas is made up of molecules that look like this. And it turns out these molecules are really, really good for making energy. And the chemical equation that I have below there, CH4 plus O2 gives you CO2 and water, is precisely the reaction that we use to power our power plants, right? To generate energy to keep the lights on. And you can see that the products in this reaction are CO2, which is the bad thing that we don't want to generate too much of, and water, which is fine. Water is benign. And then the key thing to know about this number here is that the bigger the negative number this is, the more energy you get. So you get a lot of energy from this reaction. So very, very large negative value means we get good energy, which is why we like to use these, right? There's a reason that fossil fuels have been the most common fuel sort of to power our world. So now we can think about, okay, that was energy from machines. What about energy in food, energy for us, right? What is the energy that we consume to keep our bodies running? And actually sort of the primary form of energy for humans is actually glucose, which is this molecule here. So that's a form of sugar. So glucose, fructose, sucrose are all different forms of sugar, but they also, as you can see, have a lot of carbons, a lot of C's, and a lot of H's. So not so different from the stuff that you see up here. And so actually what you can then write is a very similar type of equation to the one we did up here, where now we have glucose as the first molecule that we're going to react. It's still going to react with air. We breathe in O2, right? That's one of the reactants in this reaction. And then we spit out CO2, right? Our exhalation contains a lot of CO2 because we're doing this reaction in our bodies. And you can see that this is also a huge negative number. So we generate a ton of energy in eating food, basically. But the problem is we're also generating CO2. So this is not a good form of energy to replace our carbon-based fuels up there. And so some of the fuels of the future, these non-carbon fuels that we think might be potentially really interesting, are things like hydrogen. So you can see now we've removed all of the carbon, so no more C's in this equation. And so as a result, you only get H2O and no CO2. That's a potentially powerful reaction. And then you can also imagine using ammonia, so nitrogen containing fuels. And again, because there's no carbon, it doesn't make any CO2, and we only get N2, which is also the primary component of air anyway, so that's no big deal, and water. But the main problem you can see is that these numbers are not as big and negative. So we just don't get as much energy from these molecules. And so we have to figure out how can we make these reactions more efficient and do a better job of generating the energy. So this is a demo I usually do for my undergrads, and we like explode a gummy bear, which is why I have a gummy bear here. Unfortunately, you guys won't get to see the exploded gummy bear. So, okay, so now we know what's already known about this question. So we know H2 fuel can be used to generate energy and no CO2. But we also know that the reaction is kind of slow and kind of inefficient and doesn't really give us that much energy. So now we've reached our research question. So we want to make a hypothesis and you want to design experiments. And so our hypothesis was that we need a catalyst to improve this reaction. So for those of you that haven't taken any chemistry before, a catalyst is something that speeds up a reaction but doesn't get consumed during that reaction. So you can use it over and over again. And then our hypothesis about the catalyst was that if we take gold nanoparticles and we put a really thin surface layer of a noble metal, in this case palladium, we would be able to accelerate the reaction. So this is a little bit into the technical weeds, but I'll show you kind of what my lab actually does, which is we try to make these devices that can power cars. So we call them fuel cells. They take hydrogen, turn it into protons and electrons, which then pass through an electrochemical circuit and reduce water on the other side. So you can see the net reaction is precisely the one that I showed you, where you take H2 and O2 and turn it into H2O. And then my group actually just makes these really, really tiny particles. And so you can see 10 nanometers. A nanometer is 10 to the minus 9th meters. So it's a really, really, really small unit. So we make these really tiny little nanoparticles. These are little spherical balls of gold. And then we put these really thin layers of palladium out on the surface so that we can use that to catalyze this oxygen reduction reaction that I showed you guys up here. So yeah, so that was kind of what I wanted to show you guys. And I think, think about these things even as students now, right? Like I think even as, an 8th grader, you can really pose scientific questions and come up with hypotheses and do research even at your age. And like, I think that's really the best thing you can do to think about how to become a scientist, is to say like, can I, come up with a cool question and try to answer it just in my house, with the things that I have around me? And maybe you could present it in a science fair project, or you could present it at your school in some context. That, this is the best way to really start to think about how to become a scientist. And it's really all about just being curious, and asking questions and wanting to know the answers. And, I think if you have that spirit, you have what it takes to become a scientist. Okay. Yeah, I'm happy to take any questions if you guys wanted to ask anything, but that was what I wanted to say.
Any questions for Dr. Li?
It's a white building, and my part is
It doesn't look like anybody has any questions. Thank you so much, Dr. Li, for coming out and telling us all about your research. It was really interesting. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Yeah, it was great to be here. Thanks, everyone, for coming.
It's time for the hydrogen peroxide and stuff.
Have a great day. Thank you so much.
Yep.
It talks about being a scientist.
Nice.
Now that we from our wonderful guest speakers, we can start making and performing experiments. Okay, So who's ready to make elephant toothpaste and lava lamps?
Yeah!
Okay, so
Oh yeah!
it's actually very similar to what Dr. Li was doing because we are going to be making, we're going to be doing a chemical reaction and using a catalyst and also producing a gas as a result. So hydrogen peroxide is what we are going to be using today to make our elephant toothpaste. It's used to clean cuts and skin wounds. So sometimes if you get hurt, you'll put hydrogen peroxide on to disinfect it. Its chemical formula is H2O2. The H's are the hydrogen atoms and the O's are the oxygen atoms.
Yeah. So I talked to.
If you've ever seen hydrogen peroxide, you'll notice that it's stored in a large brown bottle, and the instructions tell you to keep it in a cool place. This is to prevent a chemical reaction from occurring, that chemical reaction being decomposition, or the breaking down of the hydrogen peroxide molecules into water and oxygen gas. So these are the supplies that you're gonna need, and I'll play this video while you gather them.
All right, how's this for revenge? A solution of hydrogen peroxide and one of saturated potassium iodide.
What's this?
Mountain Dew. Ah, refreshing. Now, we're going to combine these chemicals with ordinary dish soap, creating a little exothermic release of oxygen.
Foamy vengeance.
Yes, exactly.
This is brilliant, Sheldon. How are we going to deploy it in Kripke's office?
Already taken care of. Observe. This is a live shot of Kripke's lab via a mini webcam I was able to install thanks to a $1 bill discreetly placed in the night janitor's shirt pocket. At the same time, I also secured large quantities of these chemicals above the tiles in the drop ceiling.
Sheldon, you remind me of a young Lex Luthor.
You flatter me, sir.
Let me guess, motion sensors?
Yes, the reaction will be triggered when Kripke reaches the center of the room. Mwahaha.
I gotta say, I am really impressed. This is truly the Sheldon Cooper way to get even.
It may be low tech, but I still maintain the whoopee cushion has comic validity.
Okay. So if everybody has their supplies, we're going to be moving on to the procedures so that you can all learn how to make your own elephant toothpaste reaction.
Let me get my knees because.
Okay, so for the procedure, you're going to be putting half a cup of the hydrogen peroxide into the bottle that you want the chemical reaction to occur in. So this is going to be the container that the elephant toothpaste is going to be made in. You're going to add a very, very large squeeze of dish soap to the bottle, and if you want it to be colored, you can add food coloring. In a separate container, you're going to mix 1 tablespoon of yeast or 1 packet of yeast with 3 tablespoons of warm water. And then once you mix that, you can pour it into the container that you want your reaction to occur in. So I'm going to play a video of me doing it so that you can follow along. Let me know if you can hear it or not.
So today we're making elephant toothpaste. You're probably noticing that I'm outside and using an old table.
Yeah, I hear it.
It can be a little messy. So make sure that you're putting on your safety goggles and get ready to make your elephant toothpaste. So what you're going to need is hydrogen peroxide, a glass or a container for the reaction to occur in, something to mix in, food coloring if you want, yeast, 1 tablespoon or 1 packet, half a cup measuring cup, a tablespoon, something to mix with, warm water, scissors if you need to open your yeast, and dish soap. So what we are going to be doing is we are going to first measure out half a cup of hydrogen peroxide and pour it into our container.
Check. You did that, right?
I heard her say
I lost some of that, so I'm just gonna put some more in. Next, you can add your food coloring. I'm using glue so that it matches the dish soap.
So we're gonna add.
You can stir that in.
Can you pause it?
Yeah, I can pause it.
Next, you're going to be adding.
Let me know when most of you are catched up or caught up.
Is it the hydrogen peroxide and then the food coloring?
Oh, I got
You mix the hydrogen peroxide, the food coloring, and the dish soap in the same container.
Okay, thank you.
And if you're using a water bottle, you can just kind of swish it around if you can't fit a stir stick in.
Can I stir?
Let me get you
Oh, it's really red now.
Can you kind of go over the directions from the beginning?
Yeah. Okay, do you want me to restart the video?
Yes.
Okay. Do you want me to slow it down as well?
Yes.
I'll put it on 0.5 times speed. I might sound funny, but my apologies. I skip this.
Everyone, so today we're going to be making elephant toothpaste. You're probably noticing that I'm outside and using an old table. That's because this experiment can be a little messy. So make sure that you're putting on your safety goggles and get ready to make your elephant toothpaste. What you're gonna need is hydrogen peroxide, a glass or a container for the reaction to occur in, something to mix in, food coloring if you want, yeast, 1 tablespoon or 1 packet, half a cup measuring cup, a tablespoon, something to mix with, warm water, scissors if you need to open your yeast, and dish soap. So what we are going to be doing is we are going to first measure out half a cup of hydrogen peroxide and pour it into our container.
Mommy, let me help you with this. Oh. Yeah, we're just talking about
I lost some of that. So I'm just gonna
now you can add the purple.
some more in. Next, you can add your food coloring. I'm using glue so that it matches the dish soap. And you can stir that in. Next, you're going to be adding a very large dish soap. And we're going to mix that up as well.
Yes, right.
Next, we are going to be measuring 3 tablespoons of warm water and pouring it into our mixing container. Okay.
What type?
Make sure the water is not too cold and not too hot. Okay. Next, we're going to be mixing in our yeast with the warm water.
Oh, we already did that. She's wearing swimming goggles. She's wearing.
You're going to want to stir this for a little bit so that the yeast is all mixed.
Can you pause it?
I can pause it.
Can I touch it? Pause it, please.
Let me know when you're ready for it to continue.
Sorry, question. Was the yeast supposed to be in a separate container with the water and not in the other items?
Oh, what do you mean by that? Can you clarify?
Yeah, sorry. Are all the items being mixed together in the one container for the elephant paste?
No, you want the yeast and the water to be mixed separately from the hydrogen peroxide because once they combine, the reaction starts.
Okay, so we accidentally put the water in with all the other items. Can we, I've not added the yeast yet. Can we add the yeast in the warm water and then mix it? It'll just have 3 extra tablespoons of water.
Yeah, that should be fine. You might just want to add a little bit more of the hydrogen peroxide. That's all.
Got it.
I accidentally put the warm water and the yeast in the same thing with the hydrogen peroxide.
Now, our savings are up.
If you mix the yeast and it's just that the reaction is going to start earlier than you wanted it to.
Tampa. What size?
Oh, not yet. No, no.
We start. We
Start at spring. And we
Once you put hydrogen peroxide in your yeast, you're going
no, don't start it. Go. I don't want to wear glasses.
You'll play the video?
Yes.
Okay. Keep doing that. I'll fix it. It was right here.
How much peroxide do you put in the warm water?
You don't put any of the hydrogen peroxide in the warm water.
Okay.
Okay, put it in right.
The hydrogen peroxide is
No, wait until she tells you what to do.
No, we rise it.
Okay, go
I need to change this layout so it's easier to navigate.
Not too cold.
What do you do after you put the yeast in your water?
Can you put it in there?
You know how
I'm going to want to stir this.
No, it's peroxide. It's okay.
Wow. I buy eye drops. Purify and clear just a second. Stop white and
Once you your hydrogen peroxide and your yeast, you're going to want to clear off the table. Nothing gets on the reaction occurs. So now we're going to very quickly pour in the yeast mixture with the hydrogen peroxide and quickly run away.
No, what state didn't come up because we didn't have a from to her Smith. They have something.
Carly said the and I know you didn't have a choice, and I'm sorry about that. But what you said about responsibility. Yes. It was
Some more fun. Except we've multiplied the recipe by instead of half a cup of hydrogen peroxide, 2 cups, and instead of 1 pack of yeast, we have 4. So let's see how that is. 3, 2, 1.
Put your goggles on.
Look at. Here, you're done. Go rinse off.
If any,
How much yeast?
how much yeast?
Water.
You put 1 tablespoon or 1 small packet of yeast in the water. If any of you want to unmute yourselves and share your observations about what you found when you made your elephant toothpaste.
She actually said so.
Wait, still rising.
Oh, that's a cool color.
That's so cool. I want to make a
It rose slowly, I think, because we had to try again.
Quartz.
Container sharing reservation.
from the garage.
Mine formed out of bubbles on the top.
If
Did you wash your hands with soap? I just went from off.
Can
you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
It's going.
So while you're, have you all finished your experiment?
Yeah, okay.
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 Yeah.
So just a little bit of background information about this experiment is that if you feel the container, it's a little bit warm, right?
Yeah.
That's because when the atoms in the molecules are rearranging, they have lower energy. And since energy can't be created or destroyed, it's released as heat. So that's why the container feels warm. And the bubbles are the oxygen gas that's being produced from breaking down of the hydrogen peroxide.
The chemical reaction is slowing down.
The reason that we're using yeast is because there's an enzyme in it that acts as a catalyst. The enzyme is like a lock, and the hydrogen peroxide fits into it like a key. And the enzyme, it kind of changes it applies stress and moves the hydrogen peroxide around, and that helps it break down quicker. And it lowers the amount of energy needed for the reaction to occur. So put in simpler terms, it's like you have to walk up a 40-step staircase for the reaction to occur. But once you get up the stairs, it's like a big slide down, and then you have your end results, your products. But what the enzyme, the catalase in the yeast, it kind of lowers the amount of energy that you need for the reaction to occur. So instead of walking up 40 stairs, you only have to walk up like 10. That's pretty cool, right?
Yeah.
And that, as a result, speeds up the reaction. So on your own, when you're at home and a little bit bored, you can repeat this experiment. But you could also learn something new by seeing how the experiment changes when you put the yeast in cold or hot water, because this is going to affect the enzyme and it's not going to work as well. Or you could use different shaped containers or different amounts of yeast.
Oh, yeah, now kind of
So do not try this at home, but this is just to show that how oxygen gas is being produced. Yeah. It lets me play it.
Hey, I have a question.
Yeah?
Is the jar in the bag used for the lava lamp?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Oh, look,
Whoever's drawing on the screen, I'd greatly appreciate it if you could stop. Thank you. So it's time to make the lava lamps.
oh no. God, the lava.
So what you're gonna need is a clear jar or cup. That's a typo, I'm sorry. A clear jar or cup, water, food coloring, oil, whether it be vegetable, mineral, or baby oil.
A vegetable.
And you'll also need an Alka-Seltzer tablet, or if you received a STEM kit, you can also use the denture cleaning tablet. It almost works better, in my opinion.
This jar work? Jar work?
So what you're gonna do is you're gonna fill your container about 1/3 of the way full with water. Then you're gonna mix the food coloring into the water.
Talk to me. Of water.
After you put the colored water in the jar, fill the rest of the container, but not to the top, with oil. Then you're gonna drop half of the fizzing tablet into the container. And here's an instructional video on it.
How much oil?
So right now we're going to be making a miniature DIY lava lamp. So what you're going to need is water, Alka-Seltzer tablets or dental cleaning tablets, food coloring.
How much oil?
How much oil?
So you've got enough water to fill about 1/3 or 1/4 of the jar, and then you fill the rest of the container, not to the top, with oil.
In order to keep that money, they'll go head-to-head against the beast. Anyone who gets caught is out.
What you're going to do is you're going to first put on your safety goggles. And then you're going to fill a glass that's clear with about 1/3 or 1/4 of the way full with water. Next, you're going to put in drops of food coloring to dye the water the color that you want your lava.
I need blue.
Yeah, I gotta make my if it's gonna turn out that way.
You can use any color that you want.
So stir in food coloring. And then next, you're gonna fill the rest of the container almost to the top with oil, but don't fill it completely. What you're going to see is that the oil is going to rest on top of the water, and that's because they are different densities. Okay. The last step is to add your Alka-Seltzer tablet. Or denture.
You need to run.
I should have gotten 6.
LeBron James at trivia.
So lots of typing, you've only one the object.
Once it's in the packet, to cut tablet in half or break it in half so that it's too much.
I heard somebody asked to pause it, so
kind of.
You can open that.
I'm on day 20 right now. I just finished day 20.
So what you should see after you add the fizzing tablet is that the water is going to form color. The colorful water is going to float to the top and float down.
You can also add more to the tablet if it's not working as well.
It's going up.
You like that?
So you should start to see the oil
Really well.
rest on top, and
They
there's
gotta run away after they add the.
floating back down.
When this tabby's almost done. I think. When it's still bubbling, you can put the other one in.
We didn't. How long does this last? Like 1 day or a few hours or how long?
So the reaction is going to last as long as there's the fizzing tablet. So you could always add more fizzing tablets when you have a chance, and then the reaction will continue.
Okay. Well, look at hers.
Yeah.
If the
Stuff's going up.
float to the top,
Give me another fizzing tablet.
and
Don't worry.
new one.
We need another fizzing tablet. It's going away. It will last as long as it anyway.
I think it's slowing down enough. What do you think? You gonna put the other one in? Yeah.
Yes.
Ooh, did you hear that? Yeah. Ooh, it's still going. I hear it. Look.
Look at the
Enjoy.
All right, put the other one in. Put them in. Drop them in.
Look at the purple.
There you go.
Hi, so right now we're going to be making a miniature DIY lava lamp. So what
Okay. So if you want to share your observations.
Sure.
Mine was really fizzy. It looked like soda, and like it was kind of popping around.
There you go. Keep the lid on, okay?
Yay. This is awesome.
Yeah.
My observation. Here's how mine turned out.
Everybody's looks really cool.
I observed because of the tablet I put in, my lava lamp smells like Sprite.
Oh, cool.
When are we gonna do the bookmark?
The bookmarks will be at one of the later sessions. So now we can learn about why our lava lamps work. So oil is less dense than water. That causes it to float on top of it. So when you have your water down here in the cup and the oil is on top, right? Water is also polar and the oil is non-polar, so they don't mix. And polar means that it has an unbalanced electric charge. So the Alka-Seltzer tablet, it reacts with the water, and that creates gas. So what you're seeing, the bubbles are the carbon dioxide gas. So these bubbles are going to bring the small amounts of colored water up to the surface, since the carbon dioxide gas is less dense than the water and the oil. When the bubbles make it to the surface, the gas goes into the air, and since water is less dense than the oil, it makes its way back to the bottom. So that's why you see the lava lamp effect. So did anybody notice what both of these experiments had in common?
The carbon dioxide?
Close. So the first one, it was releasing oxygen gas, and the second one is releasing carbon dioxide gas. So in a way, they're both releasing gases. So another experiment that you can do at home is you can put vinegar in a bottle or test tube and put baking soda in a balloon. So I'm gonna try to show it to you live, but my camera is not the best, so I'm not sure how well it's gonna work. Okay, so right here I have a test tube with vinegar, and I have a balloon with baking soda. I'm gonna put the balloon onto the test tube. Okay, and then I'm gonna lift the balloon upright so that the baking soda goes into the vinegar, causing the reaction. This is gonna produce gas and inflate the balloon. Can you see it?
Wow. Yeah, I can see the balloons like going big.
Pretty cool, right? So that's a way that, so in chemical reactions, something new is created. In this case, a gas. And we can observe this by seeing how the balloon is inflating, because that's showing we're capturing the gas. And the test tube is also cold, so that's showing a change in temperature. So you can always do that at home, and these are the research sources that I use for this session. Thank you all for participating. I really hope that you enjoyed the second session. If you have any feedback on how I can improve to make next session more interesting or fun, please email inspiringfuturestemstars@gmail.com.
Excuse me?
Yeah?
What are we doing for the next session?
The next session, we will be learning about biology. We're going to extract DNA from strawberries and make our own edible DNA model with Twizzlers and mini marshmallows. We're also going to make color swirl in milk by using dish soap. And you'll also get to hear from Lisa Zanotti, who is an AP biology teacher, and she's a really cool lady. So I think you'll really enjoy that. And I encourage you all to go to this link and check out our project's Flipgrid board for fun STEM challenges like making a bow out of aluminum foil, making a ring out of chips, and there's also, like, if you all remember from the beginning of the session, Dr. Li was encouraging you all to come up with a question and test it to see if you can learn anything new. There's a virtual science fair on this Flipgrid where you can create your own experiment, record a video, and post it for others who are participating in this project to see. And if you have any questions, I'll stay on this Zoom for a few minutes. Thank you all.
Bye. Thank you, Hannah.
You're welcome.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You're welcome. Have a good day.
Thank you so much.